Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to RCT Creations. It has been a little while since we've done the last episode here in the Fun Corporation series. It's been a while since I've uploaded just in general. Finally moved over to the new place and getting settled in, and we're ready to get the next ride going. The last video I did was Storm Surge, I believe, over at Funland, which was a 2004 edition. We are now heading into 2006. As you can see over here at Joyland, the park is currently closed. There's no guests in. We are just getting kicked off in January. We have the base $750,000 that we start with every season here. And we are going to get kicked off with a new coaster, the first new coaster at this park since Xenon 200, or not Xenon 200, that's Funland, since Xenon The Last Stand opened in 1998. So we are finally switching on over to the back of the park here in one of the only open spaces we've got left. If you look here at Joyland, we are kind of running out of space here. We have this huge mountain over here, which will probably be used eventually, but the terrain on it's kind of rough. It'd be really expensive, but over here, we've got this back section of land. And for our new addition here for Joyland, it's been a while. It's been since the end of 1996 that a coaster like this existed here at Joyland here in New York, but we are going to be constructing a Great Coasters International wooden roller coaster. So it's been a long time coming, but I'm excited to get this ride rolling in. I'm going to flatten out some of the land here, and I do have a design in mind already. So we have a height of 90 feet, speed of 55 miles an hour, and a track length of 4,009 feet. So what I did was I copied the park over into a design, and I was able to kind of construct what I wanted here. So I do have the design in mind. And we're going to start with our station piece right here. And what I'm going to do, at least initially, is just change the colors up so it looks like it's brand new. So we're going to use the light brown. And then a couple seasons in, we'll get it switched over so it's not quite as, bright as the wood kind of weathers, I guess is the term I'm looking for. As far as trains, we are going to use the GCI Millennium Flyers. And I still haven't quite decided on a train color yet. I think I'm going to go with either gray, black, or this light brown color to match the wood. So the original idea, the original concept behind this ride back in my younger days in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, so it was kind of a Cowboys versus Native Americans original intention, which obviously not great, so we're going to try to switch it over from that. So the name of the ride is going to stay the same, however, the theme is not going to be that, just because I don't think that has aged very well at all, and quite honestly. So, yeah, we are not going to roll with that. That was something younger me was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool, and then once you get older, you realize, yeah, that's really not that cool. So, anyway, let's go ahead and get kicked off with the transfer track here. And our, whoopsies, bend out of the corner, so we'll start here just because we want to make sure we have enough space for our transfer. So we want our transfer track to be 6 long, and it is. And then this is going to match the wood color of the rest. And then for now, we're just going to match the train to the one on the main track. So we'll continue on with the brake run here. And a big reason I want to start here is just because you want to make sure you have room for everything, which we do. But one thing I still have not done yet, and this will be apparent when we get to the fitting out, is getting the queue line through the structure is going to be an interesting story because of how twisted the layout ends up being here. And I'm over in my design park right now, so if it looks like I'm just paused here, I do have the design park open. I need to kind of figure out some things here. Okay. So we'll get our brake run placed. Like so. And then this ride does end up getting pretty darn close to our train tracks over there. And we'll start with the dip. Oh, and then we do end with a little bit of a fake out section right here. Kind of one of those trick tracks that CCI coasters are pretty accustomed to, but we did it for this ride right here, which I thought was kind of a cool idea. And then we'll build our last little bunny hill, and we will stop right there. So when it comes to these GCI wooden coasters, I think they tend to be some of the hardest to actually build with when it comes to the RCT limitations, because GCI wooden coasters are usually just so twisty and it's hard to replicate that. I was really hoping that by this point we'd have some of the extra pieces for the wooden coaster as well, like some of those wider turns, because those would really, really help with building a GCI wooden coaster. But, you know, the OpenRCT2 devs are doing a really good job at adding more pieces that I'm really excited to use. So we get further in the latest update in version 5.0, I believe is what it was. They added unbanked and banked quarter helices for a lot of coasters, which is going to be huge, especially for some of those, you know, dips out of the station and then turns into the final brake run or turns into transfer tracks, whatever. There's a lot of really cool stuff we can do with that. So there's a lot of really cool rides I'm really looking forward to building here. So there's the top of our lift. So we have the GCI kind of like lateral built into the lift hill right there. Most GCIs start like that. Renegade at Valley Fair is a good one. Prowler kind of does this as well. Most GCIs are going to have a little twist into the lift, so you get a little bit of lateral force. Now, one thing I used to do with my GCIs that I really don't do anymore, and these are the first designs. I'm gonna make it plural there, so kind of think about that. We're gonna be adding another one of these eventually in the next season. You just gotta kind of guess where it's gonna end up going. But at first, what I would do is kind of start immediately with a bank turn here. However, what I think is more appropriate with these GCI designs is start with an unbanked turn, and then after the first curve, you then bank the track a little bit. So it gives you a little bit more space, and then you get a nice lateral force heading into that turn, which I think actually reflects the real-life GCIs pretty well. So we're going to do kind of an apocalypse-style first drop here. Or I think even Ozark Wildcat at Celebration City in Branson had kind of a style like this as well, where it had a kind of mini drop. It turned around and then went into the main event. So we're going to do a little bit of a bank turn there, a little bit of a lateral airtime hill, and now we're going to dip down and really get into where we pick up our speed. And we're going to go down to the 15-foot mark, and then we're going to hit a high-speed turn. And we're going to spread it out a little bit just because the train's going to be carrying a lot of speed heading into this element. So when you're at these valleys here with these rides, make sure to spread these turns out, because I see a lot of people that'll build, you know, a huge hill like this and immediately follow it up with just a turn like that, which for RCT purposes is fine. If you're going for a more realistic look, you definitely want to spread these turns out. So a little bit of extra bank, a little bit of extra space, leave yourself there. Even this is a pretty tight pull out for a drop like this into a turn on a wooden coaster, especially on the ground. But after that turn, we're going to go straight up, and we're going to go into I don't know if there's really, I guess an overbank would kind of be the term for it. Gwazi did this. This is where like they kind of had that high five section on the original Gwazi before RMC came in and transformed it, where the two trains would pass each other. So we're going to add an element like this to this ride. And I'm not quite where I want to be because I did not spread this out enough. There we go. So now we have our overbank. And we're going to drop back down into kind of a standard little hill here. Nothing too crazy. Dropping down to 30 feet, and then we get to play around with this restricted area fence too, because now it's not just restricting Salem Lake here. It's going to be restricting two rides. Into our valley. Then we're going to pop back up into a little bit of a turnaround. And we're going to go up over the final brake run, around the transfer track, and around the station. And what we're going to do, we're going to start with a bank. And since the train is going to be losing speed the higher up it climbs, we're going to unbank the track for a little bit of lateral. And we're going to dip back down. So when you're building these GCIs, you don't want to have too many sections of straight track. Even this, on this drop, is a little crazy for a GCI to have that much straight track. This is as well. But again, with the limitations of the game, you got to get a little bit creative. So we're going to do a little bit of and the inspiration for this element comes from Prowler at Worlds of Fun, where you kind of have, as it is about to return to the station, it levels out on an unbanked turn and then does a double down. with a little bit of an airtime hill in it, which is absolutely a fantastic element. So we're taking a little bit of inspiration from that. One thing that's a little unrealistic is how high off the ground we are right now. This is a lot of bracing you'd have to put in. That would be really expensive. But for the most part, on a ride like this, we're okay. Then we're going to do the same thing heading out this way, except we're going to start with a lateral unbanked turn and then move into a banked turn. And then we're going to do a little bit of an S-bend and switch directions and dive back down to the ground here into this little ravine as we get closer to the lake here. So we're going to pick up a lot of speed heading into this section. So even though we're pretty far into the layout, we're still picking up a lot of speed so the ride doesn't get dull. Then we'll hop into a turnaround right here. And this is kind of an older style GCI element. You see this on the Roars at Discovery Kingdom and then SFA as well. You saw an element kind of like this turnaround point. I think Thunderhead also has some stuff like this. We're going to dive back down, level out this way, and now we're going to start making our way back to the station. So we're going to use the momentum we just picked up to carry us back. So we're going to put an airtime hill in right there, drop down to about the 10-foot mark. Oops, a little bit higher. There you go. Do another little bit of an S-bend. A little bit of an airtime. I guess not really even a little bit of an airtime hill. We're just going to climb back up and start leveling out here. Actually, I'm off somewhere because this should line up. Oh, I know where my spacing's off. My ending here. Oopsies. Our fake out track is not quite long enough. And there you go. So there is our layout, which I think looks absolutely fantastic. I'm a huge fan of the way this layout ended up turning up. Now, one thing I did not do in the design world, the design portion was just for the layout, so I have not done any of the fitting out for the ride at all yet. So like the building for the station and transfer and then the queues have not been figured out, so this is going to be an interesting process as we get there. However, this layout I am a huge fan of, and I think for now what we're going to do, since the ride is brand new, we're going to clear out some of the vegetation around it, which we will eventually start placing back as we get in, but when it comes to the ride being so new, we want to kind of clear the vegetation out around it, because they would have to construct the ride. And then we got to put some of those batter bracing pieces in a little bit, get the structure a little bit more fitted out. But yeah, there is our layout for our GCI wooden coaster here for Joyland, and I'm still trying to figure out what the new theme is going to be. The name is going to stick. However, I just need to figure out a better theme for the ride itself. We're definitely going to go for the Old West theme. It's crammed into Minetown back here, but we'll get that figured out. All right, we'll go ahead and hop on over into the fitting out portion. All right, and getting kicked out with fitting out, we're going to start with the station as always. We're going to raise the land underneath just so the base of the building is relatively even. Always makes it easier rather than trying to build scenery into the land, just taking, the land, making it flat, and then building your building around it. And the nice thing about having the transfer track directly behind the station, which isn't a thing many GCIs feature, but some of them did. I mentioned Ozark Wildcat at Celebration City earlier, and that one was one where the transfer track was straight off the end of the station. Wildcat at Hershey was the same way, and Lightning Racer at Hershey is also the same way. Not a super common thing. Usually there's a bend in the track or something before that transfer, but some of them do have the transfer straight back, so that's what we're going to go with. And especially with this being an early era GCI, their first one opened in 96. I think 96 was when Wildcat opened. But so this one's a relatively early one within the first 10 years. In more recent times, they tend to get a little bit more creative with the layout as Jeff Pike started to take over. And this would have been right around the time Jeff Pike started to take over their designs. Because at first it was Mike Boodley doing a majority of the layouts for them. I know we're doing the fitting out and I'm talking about layout designs and all that fun stuff, but Nonetheless, now we're moving into the queue design, and if you watch, I'll kind of like take a break on the queue because I knew what I wanted to do with the overflows, and there's not going to be a whole lot of overflow because this is about the only amount of space I had for it. But just a little bit of overflow before we hit the station. The path to the ride ends up being kind of windy, and it took a lot of time to kind of figure out how I wanted to make that work. And, you know, with a lot of these GCI coasters, with how compact and twisty they are, a lot of the queue path and exit ramps are really kind of chaotic. A big one that came to mind is a Renegade at Valley Fair with the limited amount of space they had. The queue path for that ride gets kind of interesting. It goes underneath the transfer track and just kind of using whatever space they had, and we're going to do the same thing here. And then to take a break from thinking about the queue line, I ended up doing some of the extra supports, which I started to do and then removed some just because I wasn't sure, you know, what I wanted from them. Unlike with the Mega CCI like Houston Comet we did earlier, the structures for the GCIs tend to be a lot more straightforward and are a lot less complex, I think, than those late era CCIs with the steel structures, because those were very boxy, whereas the GCIs kind of go straight down. There's a lot of lateral force one direction, and then overall a lot less complexity from the extra structure on the GCIs as opposed to the CCIs, even the gravity groups. But going back to the queue, we're going to dig a little bit of a path underneath, have the exit path follow the entry path. And then we have this nice little space right here where we can have the queue come out underneath that little airtime hill. And looking back on it, I kind of wish I would have extended that one more down so it kind of leveled out underneath that hill a little bit more than it does. But at the end of the day, we ended up being pretty good. So talking about the theme, which I will do here momentarily, I ended up kind of thinking of a better way to do it. So rather than the original theme, which I had talked about, I think what I would like to do, and what I ended up doing, was the entrance ended up being kind of a saloon entrance, and rather than it being Native Americans against cowboys, which again, not a good idea from way back in the day, but I rather did two rival clans within Minetown, and their first battle ends up kicking off with the saloon. And then we use this little structure to kind of hide the queue path underneath the support structure. In there, you could have a bunch of little theming elements. And even in the saloon entrance building that will go up here shortly, there's a good opportunity to kind of put some theming elements in there that you don't actually have to put in there, but you can just kind of use your imagination. I know there's some people that will decorate the interiors of their buildings. I'm not much the case, just because you're never really going to see it. And then you're using a lot of objects that you really don't necessarily need to use up and then slow the park down. Especially with the amount of time I'm using that hyperspeed mode to kind of get through the seasons. I don't think there's any real benefits in furnishing the inside of these buildings. So there's where the entrance is going to be. We built a little bit of an offshoot path. We're going to wall in a lot of the queue there and then go up. And then here's where the saloon is going to go. I was originally going to do something like Xenon TLS over on the front end of the park, but there was a good little building at Funland that I really liked that may or may not come into play later. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But we're going to use that building as kind of our, I guess, I can't think of the term right now, which is really unfortunate. Our blueprint, that's the word I'm looking for. So we're using that as our blueprint and kind of building that little saloon style entrance, which I think ended up turning out pretty well, actually. And then it gives you a little bit of theme you can put in there. You walk down underneath the train bridge and then you head into the structure where you get all kinds of cool stuff. You get to see the train travel around. You get to hear the rumble of the wooden coaster as it travels through. And then the exit path coming up on the other side. So they're right next to each other. And you kind of get to isolate the coaster a little bit. So we're zoning the staff in a little bit. With the coasters at the Fun Corp parks, like to have a mechanic specifically for that coaster because that's the headline draw. I mean, the game name is Roller Coaster Tycoon after all. So that's where if the coasters are down, we got a problem. A scrambler being down for a little bit, less of an issue to me than one of the coasters being down for a long period of time. Then after that, we're going to put a little bit of vegetation. We're going to remove the restricted area fence, and I did end up redoing it, unfortunately not in the video. Then another thing we need to end up doing after we run the test runs, and the excitement rating ended up being pretty good, around a 7, nearly an 8 actually. But the last finishing details here as we're going to transition over, because I forgot to do it in the original video, is how do we get the trains on and off the track? So let's go ahead and phase over here. We're going to raise up the structure here and then build a little bit of a path where we could have some heavier equipment bring the trains through. And then to fit that equipment through, we had to modify the Salem Lake queue a little bit, remove one of the overflows, and then just kind of put the gate in there and then make the dirt path where it looks like machinery could travel along and get to the transfer track. But that will do it for the RCT Construction episode for War at Joyland. Keep an eye out for the next one and keep an eye out for the POV. Thank you all for tuning in and apologize for the delays, but we are back. See you later.